We have to change the culture. And I believe in the power of brands to do that. Legislation, politics, they're all downstream from culture.
I needed to build a factory. And I thought about those stories, immigrants that came here, unified and shaped America through New England's factories, through industrialization.
Just because something looks good doesn't mean that it's shallow. We can really care about female form and want to accentuate and flatter it as much as possible so you feel beautiful, but then your body's functioning as well.
Welcome to the Thought Leader Revolution with Nikki Ballou. Join the revolution. There's never been a better time in history to speak your truth, find your freedom, and make your fortune. Each week, we interview the world's top thought leaders and learn the secrets of how they built a 6 to 7 figure practice. This episode has been brought to you by eCircleacademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the podcast, The Thought Leader Revolution. I'm your host, Nikki Ballou, and boy, do we have a special episode lined up for you today. Today's episode features not one, not two, but 3 guests on a panel, plus myself. These 3 guests are cause-driven CEOs who run powerful apparel brands that are about more than just the underlying business. They're about doing something incredible and amazing out in the world. I'm going to briefly introduce you to them, but really their own introduction is going to be far more powerful. Jen Say, former Chief Marketing Officer and President of Levi's, and now the founder of XXXY. And boy, your company's been in the news a lot lately, Jen, that's for darn sure. Pete Roberts, who is the amazing founder of Origin USA. And I got to tell you, Origin USA is got to be one of the most incredible and amazing companies out there, because you guys brought apparel manufacturing in the USA and you made it cool again. And that's pretty darn awesome. And Michelle Watson, who is the founder and CEO of Missiony. And I got to tell you, this is a company that is all about creating incredible, powerful activewear and athletic wear for women, especially women past midlife. And they're all about having women be seen and having their power in the world be something that they step into powerfully and comfortably. Folks, thanks for coming on the show. Great to all have you here.
Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, you bet. So I believe that the 3 of you guys run companies that in a way remind me of, the opposite of James Dean's famous movie, Rebel Without a Cause, because you guys are rebels with a cause, right? And you've all built powerful brands by capturing the essence of your customers' imagination and the essence of their souls. And maybe, Jen, if you'd like to start, tell me the story of, why? Why did you choose to start a brand new company? And why this particular message that you've put out there into the world? And why now?
Yeah. Well, XXXY Athletics is less than a year old. Are we the youngest brand on the
Yep.
call? I don't know how long your guys' brands have been around, but we're 11 months old tomorrow. So, really in the infancy stages. We're the only athletic brand that's standing up for the protection of women's sports. The short version of why I did it, I was an elite gymnast as a child. 16 years, seven years on the national team, 1986 national champion. So I recognize the value of athletics for young women, not just in terms of winning trophies, but character development, all the real reasons you put kids into sport, perseverance, because how many people get to be an Olympian? Not very many. Unfortunately, my training environment was rife with abuse, and I really struggled when I left the sport for a good 2 decades. And I wrote a book in 2008. I was 20 years out of the sport at that point. That was really the first person account of the emotional and physical abuse and sexual abuse in the sport. That didn't go super well for me. I mean, people outside of the athletic community were shocked and stunned, but not that surprised. But my own teammates from the U.S. team, USA Gymnastics, the USOPC, they all really worked overtime to smear me. So I'm not really a stranger to, saying something true that gets you punished in the public eye. That was a lot harder in 2008 when, I was new to social media. We all were, didn't know how brutal that could be. And then, from there, I went on and I was already working at Levi's. I worked at Levi's for 23 years, worked my way all the way up the ladder from entry-level marketing assistant to brand president. And as you mentioned, I was very outspoken in San Francisco, of all places, about lockdowns and school closures. And again, said a very unpopular thing. But this time it was on a much bigger stage, not just in the world of sport, but the world at large had gone mad. And that didn't go super well for me. I ended up resigning from Levi's 2 years into that advocacy. And what I found as I went out to look for a job was I was fully canceled. Like, there was no getting a job in corporate America again. In fact, when I would interview, the repeated question was, will you apologize for what you've done? Meaning, advocate for poor children to get to go to school. And I said, absolutely not. I won't apologize. I was right about everything. And so I quickly realized I was going to have to figure out another path forward, and necessity is the mother of invention. I came up with this idea for this brand as a former athlete. And, if I dare pat myself on the back enough, a world-class, brand builder and marketer, having really driven the turnaround at Levi's that led to a very successful IPO. So, and at this point, once you're canceled once, twice, like, what's a third time? It doesn't really matter. And I recognize, I'm sure these guys will say the same thing. Brands really can influence the culture, just like music, just like art, just like movies. And not a single brand in the space was standing up for the protection of women's sports. And they all pretend, Nike being the biggest offender here, to champion female athletes. And they really treat women with astonishing disregard. So I felt like it was time. I rolled the dice a bit. Obviously in the last few months, the conversation around protecting women's sports has changed with Trump in office. But I was sort of seeing where the puck was going. And I knew that the vast majority of Americans agreed with us, but they were too afraid to stand up and say it. And I felt like we could provide that encouragement. We could make it cool to stand up for women. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing, is it sort of opens the Overton window. People see the brand and they're like, oh, I'm allowed to say that? Okay, I'll wear the t-shirt, So that's kind of where we are. We're 11 months in. It's going really well, exceeding our expectations. And, we keep fighting.
So, Jen, I saw a video clip of President Trump signing the executive order banning men from women's sports. And I noticed you were standing behind him when he did that.
Yeah.
And he looked back at you as he did that. What was that like for you, to be in the room when it happened?
That was crazy. I mean, I got invited like 12 hours before it happened. So it's weird to get an email in your inbox from the White House. At first I thought it was phishing or something. Like, I didn't think it was real. But there just haven't been that many of us standing up and pushing back on this. So, when I think about it, I've been a very public figure pushing back, along with Riley Gaines, obviously, and a bunch of other women. But it's a pretty small select group. So I guess when I thought about it, I wasn't that surprised that I would have been on the list to be there. So of course I accepted. There were a lot of women in the room, most of whom I knew, because, it's not been that many of us that have been fighting this fight. But then they placed me right behind him, which was crazy. I was like sitting in the audience and someone came and got me and said, no, you have to stand here. And you're right. At one point, he turns around and he handed me his papers, which I still have sitting on my desk, which is basically just a list of the people he had to thank. It's really just a list. Like, his whole speech, I can promise you, was off the cuff, because all I have here is a list of basically congresspeople. So it was kind of crazy. All I could think was, the world is changing. This is fantastic. We are not done yet. And I think, maybe we'll come back to it. Let someone else talk. Like, this is so just the end of the beginning of this fight. Executive orders have their limits. The sports landscape is incredibly fractured in terms of its governance. And I've been fighting governing bodies for 20 years. So we're far from done. But I think he's done everything he can to hand us the baton, we the people. And now we have to stand up and make our voice is heard, and then the governing bodies will have no choice but to change. But I think we're many years away from this getting solved.
I agree with you. I think the next step is to push for legislation at a national level and at a state level, state by state, county by county. But nationally, yeah. I think the wind is at your back, and
yes.
You probably have some real fighters on your side. People like Nancy Mace in the House, Marsha Blackburn in the Senate. Those folks will step forward strongly, and I think there's a bunch of men that are going to stand up for you. And I'll say this: I interviewed a friend of yours, Arwen Becker, last week. Wonderful lady, super lady. And here's something that she and I talked about. It's time for men to stand up for you ladies too. It just can't be just the women doing it. It's our bloody job, for crying out loud. Provider, protector. The protector part's got to start showing up a bit more on the men's side. So
I think it's standing up for the truth. I mean, doesn't everybody care about truth? It's like, come on, is this standing up for literally biological reality? There are men and there are women. Sex is binary, and women deserve their own sports spaces, privacy, safety, fairness, all of it. Why? Of course, men should care about the truth, because if we can be made to utter these ridiculous lies, then we can be made to believe anything. And that's what I find so alarming and infuriating, because any lie is possible if we further this one. So, not through me.
This is part of Saul Alinsky's playbook from a book he wrote many years ago called Rules for Radicals. And it was basically all about making people believe that a lie is the truth and a truth is a lie. And it's also out of George Orwell's 1984. So there's no question that we've got to all stand up for that. But your brand is not only a great business, it's a movement. And I think that's a big part of what you're doing. And I think it's a wonderful and beautiful thing. So
thank you. I would agree. And there's so much written about purpose-driven brands, and I think there was a good 10-year stretch where every brand was like, oh shit, I better figure out my purpose. Only purpose-driven brands succeed, and they sort of paste a purpose onto. Because I don't think you have to be a purpose-driven brand. I think you can be a brand that makes an outstanding product, and that's fine. I just had observed in the marketplace, athletic apparel is growing like this, which Michelle knows. It's the fastest growing category in apparel, and there wasn't there were all these brands lying and pretending to champion female athletes and not touching this issue with a 10-foot pole, which is the biggest issue facing female athletes today. So it just felt to me like a really unique brand positioning that would draw people in. But at the end of the day, we have to make great product, and most people come to us for the mission. They're so excited and relieved that there's a brand willing to say this, but they come back because the product is outstanding. If we just had a crappy merch brand making dumb t-shirts that wasn't high quality, they would. I mean, this is true for all of us, right? No one's going to come back. So, we're in this for the long haul, and we're going to make outstanding product.
Amen. Amen. Okay. Let's move on to Pete. So Pete, I'm going to ask you the same question, so why Origin USA, right? Why your particular message, and why now?
Sure. I mean, that's an easy one. I'll regurgitate a few things, but first to Jen's point, I do have a daughter who did play multiple sports in Maine, where,
I know, I'm aware.
The governor lives 2 miles down the road from me. I got a few messages after that whole incident the other day, like, hey, when are you running for governor? Because
nice.
In the past. And she's had
Pete,
to
I'll move down from Canada if you do it. And I'll be an unpaid volunteer for you for 6 months.
Yeah. So important to raise student athletes in my household. Both my kids are now playing college sports. So
great.
As far as just to dovetail onto Jen's statement of purpose-driven brands, I mean, the power of purpose is what has driven Origin 100% from day one. And really, for me, it was a realization that we didn't have the capabilities anymore in my community to make things. And, I grew up listening to I'm Greek, listening to my papa talk about, working at the tanneries in Peabody, Massachusetts at 8 years old, and my great yaya, first generation American, off the boat, I guess you could say, working in Francis Cabot Lowell's spinning mill in Lowell, Massachusetts, as a Lowell mill girl. So I heard these stories. I heard them romanticize about these stories growing up, and into Jen's defining moment, which is what I call it, that she has gone through the last couple of years, and why she's on a burn the boats mindset to do what's right. It's similar to me. I had a defining moment where I was trying to make product. I couldn't find manufacturing in the USA. And so I started importing. And I discovered that my manufacturer in Pakistan was ripping off my intellectual property and selling it to other brands. And I came to this realization while competing, actually in Abu Dhabi in a jiu-jitsu championship, which is like the Olympics for jiu-jitsu, which is a very small sport. It's grappling. You submit each other through arm locks and chokeholds. And I was there before a quarterfinal match, and I saw somebody walk by with a thing I had designed with a different logo on the back. And instantly I know that I had to do something about it. So 12 hours on an airplane back to Nowhere, Maine. I landed and decided I needed to build a factory. And I didn't have, I say 2 nickels to rub together or a bucket to piss in, but I did have a singleness of purpose to course correct this thing. And I thought about those stories that my papa, my great yaya, used to tell me about how New England's mills were built, and the immigrants that came here unified, melted together, and shaped America through New England's factories, through industrialization. So I called up a few friends, got their chainsaws out. We started cutting down some trees in the woods of Maine, had some eastern white pines sawn out into timbers, much like what you're looking at with Michelle's photo behind her, except much smaller. We found 2 old LL Bean Singer sewing machines, like World War II era, and we started sewing stuff. And it was like a crime of passion. Like, this had to be done. So I put myself in a corner where the only way was forward to win. And through a sheer force of will and the support of family and friends, we started to make something of it. I think another point that I discovered after we started up a generator, because we didn't have power to our little factory in the woods, was we didn't actually have access to fabric. And after this little factory was built and I had people hired, I discovered that we would have to import the fabric from China or Pakistan. Which punched me right in the liver. It was a hook to my vitals. And, so I again went on the hunt, searching in New England's abandoned mills. And I discovered an old loom. It was one left behind after the World Trade Organization came into effect, and most of the machinery went overseas. So rescued this old loom, found an old timer. Lenny, he passed a couple years ago, found an old timer to help me refurbish it, and we started weaving fabric. And that was the origin of my journey. Of course, now we're 3 factories later, 500 employees, and one of the fastest growing brands in America, and I would say menswear more than anything. We're truly bringing it back. We've been self-funded. We'll never go public. I'll never sell to private equity. I'll never sell to venture capital. We will do it 100% the way we're doing it, and it'll stay that way. So yeah, man, that's my mission, and that is the power of purpose in my life. And we are a purpose-driven brand. And I think our customers have appreciated that, and our early adopters are still with us, and our first 5 employees are still our first 5 employees. So,
wow.
When did you start it? I'm curious.
2011
Okay.
is when we started the brand. We built the factory in 2012.
Okay.
And
when did you sell your first product?
The first product we sold in 2011. Also, that was the first imported product. Yeah, and the big idea was to basically as a competitor in jiu-jitsu, was to manufacture the jiu-jitsu gi pants like jeans. And I was always a blue jean fanatic.
Gotcha.
And so that's how we ended up also
Cool.
making jeans. So
I think 20, 30 years from now, people are going to be talking about wearing a pair of Origins the way they used to talk about wearing a pair of Levi's.
I hope so.
And what blew me away, Pete, I watched Joe Rogan a lot, right? And he had such and such guest on, and I don't know what the hell, I don't remember what they were talking about, but I remember he started talking about jeans and boots. It just came out of nowhere. And he said, look, if you want a good pair of jeans and boots made right here in the USA, you should go get yourself a pair of Origins. And I think Joe just kind of did one of these and put up his feet with the boots on. And he said, these are my Origin jeans. These are my Origin boots. And I texted you. I don't know if you remember. I texted you after. I said, yo, Rogan was just repping your brand, bro. He just gave you like a 5-minute shout out. And you're like, all right, that's awesome.
He's done that a lot. He's a big advocate of the brand, and it's been great. He's really had an impact on the awareness of the brand.
Yeah, I think a big part of why your brand appeals to men these days is because the last 10, 20 years, this crazy culture that is trying to convince women that, hey, these men are women and they should be allowed into their safe spaces, is also trying to convince men that the very fact of being born a man means there's something wrong with you. You're bad, you're evil, you're an oppressor. And a lot of the younger men in particular have had enough of that. So when they hear voices out there in the culture that stand up for things that appeal to the masculine psyche, they gravitate toward those voices. That's one of the reasons why so many young men voted for Donald Trump. That's why Trump won the Hispanic men's vote, which has never been done by a Republican before. And I think, Pete, that's why Origin has got so many men buying your products, because you actually uplift men. You like men. You say, hey, men, you're great. And these are some products that'll, make you feel prouder, stand a little taller, feel a little better about being a man and being an American man wearing American clothes made right here in America. That's what I believe. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Are.
Yeah, I would agree with Jen on, like, you got to do the right things for the right reasons, and the truth will set you free. We happen to do men's because we started in jiu-jitsu, and I just, I'm a man, but I don't look at it as gender specific for what we're doing. I think the mission really outweighs we're working on a women's jean we're going to come out with in the fall, and, we're looking at some other things. So I think giving Americans what they need, built 100% on an American supply chain without compromise and from American soil, and we exhaust all efforts to do that. And I do think men are proud to wear what we make, and we've got a lot of women who love it too. They'll squeeze into the men's cut jeans, and they're just as happy. So I think there's just a movement of awareness, and I think America's becoming aware. I think they have been, but I think some things are really starting to happen now that hopefully will course correct, I believe, what's been lost, outsourced, given away, sold away over the last 30 years.
So, one of the hoodies that you sent me was an extra small. I gave it to my lady, and it fits her, and she really likes it. So,
awesome.
Jen, I got to put in a big order with you guys for her next. So, awesome. and then Michelle for you as well. So, Michelle, let's move over to you. And Jen, by the way, I'm glad you asked Pete questions. Guys, you can ask each other questions. Don't just wait on me. If something, someone says sounds cool to you, you want to comment or you want to ask him a question, feel free to jump in. It's a panel. So, Michelle, same question for you. Why your company? Why your message? And why now?
Well, first of all, I have a great appreciation that you guys are fellow athletes. Gymnastics was my favorite sport growing up, and all the men in my life are into martial arts, like Muay Thai. Oh, I trained martial arts as a kid, and they all love UFC. So jiu-jitsu is the most effective. So I'm always my husband and I have a joke that our daughter will have to take jiu-jitsu because it's an absolute essential art to learn. And so I grew up playing competitive golf as well as competitive ski racing. And so I have an appreciation for both masculinity and femininity. And I'll talk a lot about how Michi really is like one of the most feminine activewear brands. I started it in New York in 2010, so I'm the oldest one here. And we'll talk more about women over 40. But when I started, it was really about going against the grain in terms of what the offer was. Everybody was wearing the exact same product. It was a sea of sameness. And I really wanted to empower women to embrace an active lifestyle. So while other brands stood for athletes and sport, I was more about fitness and integrating movement and anything to keep you moving in your lifestyle. So I was designing for Ralph Lauren in New York, and I left and the next day started the brand out of my New York City apartment, really just doing everything on my own to start, sewing all the samples myself. And it was going to be really important for me to keep the manufacturing in North America. And because it was such a long time ago, I really wanted to find flat lock machines, and I couldn't find them in the East. And this is really before there were flat lock machines in the East. So I decided I'd go back to Canada because I'm originally Canadian. And to me, just keeping North American manufacturing was really important. It didn't matter if it was American or Canadian. I've looked at lots of factories in LA, and that could be a great place for manufacturing in the future. But I found incredible manufacturing in Toronto. And we still manufacture over 90% of our products in Canada today. So really, like the cause is about empowering women, and over time, it's really evolved to help women embrace their individuality. And now I really want to make that big shift to help women over 40 reclaim their power, because it's so important for aging women to strength train and to prioritize longevity over chasing youth. And that women trying to still be what they were back in the day and worrying about how they look, every wrinkle, sagging skin. It's really about taking what you've got, working with it, really prioritizing the nutrition as well as the movement that comes with strength training, so that we can be training for vitality and longevity versus just aesthetics. You will have the byproduct of a great aesthetic if you're doing your best, but I've always been a champion of working out for your health rather than for aesthetics alone. When you look at Michi, yes, we have a very high aesthetic, but also a very high function, which is a bit of a mind's teaser, because a lot of people see the aesthetic and think, oh, that you can't sweat in that, or you can't wear that for a workout. But then when you put it to the test, it truly performs. And I think the reason I'm very passionate about this shift is that we are very different when we first came out. And all the other brands looked exactly the same. And a lot of them shifted aesthetically, took a lot of inspiration, which can be frustrating, but let's flip it and make it flattering. And then say, well, we have to keep coming up with something better. And it's not about the designs that get taken and ripped off and duplicated, but really it's about creating that brand with something behind it and then creating the culture to go with it. So at the end of the day, it's really about putting out less products into the world, but better products. So there's like the double meaning when we talk about longevity in women. It's also about the longevity in the clothing. When we talk about women that are adaptable and versatile and self-reliant, the clothes are the same. Like they're very versatile. You can use them for a lot of functions. So really there's that really solving the problem of time and space. And then women are not really portrayed that great when they get beyond 40, but so many women are out there really changing that perspective. And I really want it to be that you look at a 50-year-old woman, and a lot of them out there are 60-year-old women, and you say, wow, I want to be like her. Like that's something to aspire to, rather than, oh my God, I'm going to be 45, I'm going to be 50. Oh, my life's over. And after having kids, like a lot of women have trouble getting back a lot of their self-esteem and their identity. And I want to be part of that movement to help women reclaim that power, because we get so much more confident as we get older. We stop caring what people think. And yeah, we become more invisible. Like people aren't noticing us as much as they noticed us in the past. But you know what? Who cares? Let's get noticed because of our personalities, because of our energy, because of the things that we're doing in the world. So I think there's a lot of really important stories to be told.
So, Michelle, you know, when I was growing up, I was a kid. My father used to tell me a woman doesn't even really become a woman until she's at least 40. That's when all the youth gets beaten out of her. I'm 57. You've met Teresa, my lady Michelle. She's my age. I think she's stunning for any age, honestly. And I I can't imagine being with somebody, I don't know, 20 years, 25 years younger than her, because I don't think I could even get along with them. I don't think we could relate to one another. You know, there's something that happens when a woman reaches a certain age, a certain level of maturity, a certain level of wisdom that I believe makes your message and your brand particularly relevant, especially when you speak about the importance of prioritizing strength training, prioritizing longevity, prioritizing health over looking good. And I was wondering if you might, expand on that a little bit.
Well, I think what we don't need to make them mutually exclusive. Just because you look good doesn't mean that you're not prioritizing and like following all of these habits for a different reason. So I think with Michi, the two exist at the same time. And that's the same with leadership. Like a lot of times we have to have command with the most delicate touch. Like we have to do two things at the same time. And I think that's an important aspect of aging. If we're going to be prioritizing strength training and creatine, protein, whatever, however we structure our wellness regime.
My wife just started taking creatine 3 days ago.
Oh,
Oh my God.
amazing. That's awesome.
I finally convinced her to start taking creatine, but yeah, she just walked in from
That's
strength
awesome.
training, and we've
Yeah,
been together since we were 16 years old, and it is true. We just both turned 46, and she's going to be a huge fan of your brand when I tell her about it.
oh, thank you. And my husband will be a big fan of yours. Yeah, so I think that just because something looks good doesn't mean that it's shallow. A lot of times it does, but really I want to kind of blow people's minds in the way that the two things can exist, that we can really care about female form and want to accentuate and flatter it as much as possible so you feel beautiful, but then your body's functioning as well. And I want women to be proud that their body still works, that they're strong so they can go surfing, so that they can still ski without knee injuries. Like it's amazing. Yeah, when women can lift their kids, like there's so much that we don't think about when we're obsessing about, oh, I don't want to bulk up if I lift over 3 pounds. And you see that shift with a lot of the top trainers that always promoted skinny. You start to see them using heavier pound weights, which is an interesting shift. I think it's slowly happening. And yeah, and I think it's just about like being able to embrace two things and not just say that because it's like, what does longevity look like? Like we can make it look aesthetically pleasing, so we can also make it glamorous. And a lot of times when people get into something, they're usually attracted maybe for the wrong reasons at first, but we want to make it last, make it a movement, not just a trend.
Yeah. Teresa's trainer is Canadian national bikini fitness champion. Her name's Lindsay Martins. And Lindsay in the off season weighs 178 pounds, man. And she looks amazing. Like Lindsay's drop dead gorgeous. And when she's on stage, she's 140 pounds, 142 pounds. And part of what Lindsay talks about with the women that she trains is stop looking at the number on the scale and start looking at how you feel, start looking at how much physical strength and energy you have throughout the day. And don't worry if the scale says 140 or 150, worry, how strong am I? How much functional power do I have day to day doing tasks? How much energy do I have going through what I go through. And she posts a lot about this on social media. So I think what you're doing is really, really cool. And I think there's quite a few folks I can introduce you to who are like top trainers in the Toronto area that are older women, over 45, even over 50, that are speaking your message out there in the world. So I think it would be a good thing for you guys to know about each other.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So let me ask the next question. So Jen, you've spoken about this a bit, but I'd like you to go a little bit more deeply into it. What does your message mean to you? Why is it important to you? And why do you think you've been able to touch something at the core of the soul of your customer with that message? And by the way, you guys, if you have comments about this, please jump in. If you've got additional questions, please jump in and interact with Jen. I don't want it to just be me.
It's interesting. I will answer your question, but Michelle talked about how this brand, her brand, is very much built around the idea of fitness. Ours is very much built around competitive athletes. And, I think many of the brands addressing women they started kind of after you, but it's become very much about fitness. And in fact, sometimes they're not even doing fitness. They're like lounging around drinking coffee. I'm like, and I was a competitive athlete, and the brands that really are about competitive athletics have never really made great traction with women, even though women compete at the same rates now that men do, growing up in youth and adolescence and into college, thanks to Title IX. It took years, but women are now competing, and women's sports is just having a moment. I mean, there's professional ice hockey leagues for women now. Professional soccer franchises are opening everywhere. Caitlin Clark, everybody knows about Caitlin Clark, bringing in crowds women have never seen. Jersey sales like up 1,000% of any female basketball player ever. So, my favorite, Simone Biles, most watched athlete in the Summer Games. 27 years old, won gold, like in gymnastics, a sport that's been said to be only for 14-year-olds. So, I'm not saying it's only competitive athletes that wear our product. I'm saying that's what our brand positioning is built around. It's around that competitive spirit. And women in their 40s, older, I turned 56 yesterday, we were competitive athletes. We still have that competitor's ire. That's what I call it. That's how we approach life. We don't want to I'm on the mat all day. I'm not saying that's what you're saying, Michelle. We don't want to accept where we are. We want to be better. And so we built a point of view around that. Now, why this matters to me, I think first and foremost is what I said earlier, which is the truth matters. And the truth always matters. And up until, not that long ago, we all knew men and women were different. And now suddenly we're pretending that sex isn't binary and men and women are not different and their bodies are the same. That's not true. So I wanted to build a brand based in truth. And I just, I have benefited immeasurably from having had the opportunity starting in the 70s, well into the late 80s, to be a competitive female athlete. And I believe very strongly that if we continue down this path, there will be no women's sports anymore. The minute a male breaks the barrier of women's competition, we don't actually have women's sports anymore. So that barrier has been broken and we need to rebuild it. If this continues, there's no reason, and in fact, somebody said it the other day on Piers Morgan, there's no reason to have separate categories. Just have one category because we just mixed it all up already anyway. So I believe the very future of women's sports is at stake. And as someone who very much personally benefited from that, despite the challenges I faced and the abuse in the sport, I benefited immeasurably. The discipline, the perseverance, the belief that I could do anything if I set my mind to it. And if I fell down, I learned to get back up again and keep going. That's why we put our children in sports, not to win a gold medal at the Olympics. I mean, a few kooky parents do it for the gold medal, but they're clueless. They don't understand how rare that is. We do it so our children learn to be resilient. And certainly we see right now in the world that many practices in play are anti-resilience. In terms of how we're raising our children, the helicopter parenting, and, all of it is the safe spaces, all of that is anti-resilience building in children. And so, I love women's sports. I love female athletes. I love the truth even more. And so, but I want to be clear. Our mission is to protect women's sports, but it's really to celebrate female athletes. If this issue gets solved, I've still got a brand proposition here. I've been standing up for female athletes to train free from abuse for 20 years. And they are not free from abuse yet. Let me be clear. In fact, the reports have gone up fourfold in the last 6 years, since there is actually a law now, the Safe Sport Act, intended to protect female athletes from abuse, and the abuse is through the roof. It's gotten worse, not better. So even with legislation, to go to your earlier point, it doesn't end. We have to change the culture. And I believe in the power of brands to do that and to influence, legislation, politics, they're all downstream from culture. And the whole reason that people are sitting and nodding and saying what I think are dumb things like trans women are biological women is because the culture has been seized upon, the language has been seized upon. They're humans worthy of dignity and respect, but women, it is compassionate to stand up for women, and women deserve their own sports and spaces. So it's really not complicated. And I just, as I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, there were a million things. A million, people were telling me run for office, which sounds like the most horrible thing on the planet to me. I don't know if you're going to embark on that in Maine, Pete, but I wanted to do what I'm good at, what brings me joy. And this just combined all of those, those things, my love of competitive athletics, of brand building, of storytelling. I've written 2 books. I've made 2 films. It just seemed to combine all of it. And I tend to leap before I think too much, which it sounds like is kind of what you did, Pete, in starting your business.
Tucked. Isn't that the only way?
Well, I mean, if you think about it too much, you're never going to do anything. Exactly. So you can always talk yourself out of it. So I was like, let's do this. So here we are making a run of it. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's why I did it. That's why it matters to me. And I knew no one else would do it. I mean, who else is going to do this? Like, you literally have to be thrice canceled to take a run at this, because this issue is the firestorm. This is the thing. Like, as much as I've been thrown under the bus and, harassed and threatened, it's nothing compared to what I get now.
Yeah.
It's nothing. I mean, we get threats to our workplace, kill all the employees, bomb the workplace. Like, it's people, it's nuts. And I just keep saying it's compassionate to stand up for women and girls. That where's the compassion for women and girls? That's all that we're doing. And I think, again, we'll come around on this, but right now it's very controversial.
I hope you've got great security at your offices, in your factories, because that's something to take seriously, 1,000%. You are one of the bravest people I've ever met, and I've had the privilege of meeting some extremely brave people in my life. One of the things you said to me in one of our past interviews together, Jen, I don't know if you remember, you said to me that most CEOs like to talk about having integrity and courage, but most of them are absolute and utter cowards. And you were one of the first people to have the ovaries to come out and say that, because most CEOs just don't want to attract negative attention. All they want to do is do as much business as they can, make as much money as they can without anybody getting too pissed off at them. And it takes somebody with extreme courage to invite the controversy that you've invited, go out there, stand up for something that matters, and build a beautiful business and a beautiful brand. So bravo.
Thanks. I do think there's a distinction between founders and C-suiters or CEOs. And, Michelle, you've obviously worked in established companies. And I do think founders are braver, but I don't think they're less greedy necessarily on average. I think many are. And I think the key is, people used to say it all the time, like, how do you retain that startup mindset? How do you fail fast, and all those Silicon Valley phrases, which, what's this Mark Zuckerberg one he used to say? Now I'm forgetting. Anyway, now everybody's poo-pooing those phrases because they don't like Elon Musk anymore. But I think you have to be pretty brave, possibly a little clueless to be a founder. Certainly at my age. I mean, I think I'm about your age, Nikki. I think I'm older than the other two. Like, who starts a startup at 55? Like, I need to have my head examined. But
The founder of Peloton.
good to know.
He was quite seasoned, and nobody wanted to invest in him, and look where he is.
Yeah, I do think. Well, older founders have a higher success rate, which isn't really surprising. But there is such a different mindset, and it's very unusual to be someone who could make it and be successful in a large corporate structure, and who can also make it and found something, because it's a different skill set. It really is. But very rarely do people have both. And what it takes sometimes to make it in corporate, I hate to say this, is to basically go unnoticed. Like, you can bob and weave and never offend anyone. And I mean, that was never my way. Yeah, I mean, that was never my way. And I think there are exceptions to that. Like, I think there are some outstanding leaders in established companies. I think it's few and far between. I think most of them are like, don't notice me. And then all of a sudden, they get to the top because they never offended anyone ever. But also, I mean, you were sewing garments. Like, I've written every line of copy for everything that's ever, every email, every bit of product. You have to be willing to do that. And most people who've spent 30 years in corporate America are not willing to go back and do that kind of work. But I will tell you, having been, an executive at Levi's for many years and on boards of other companies, like, there is nothing more boring to me than sitting and reviewing PowerPoints and talking about who's going to get laid off next, which is basically what you end up doing. You spend all your time on the worst stuff. I mean, somebody has to do it. I think it's necessary. But to me, it's just like such a breath of fresh air to do this fun stuff, pick every fabric, be deeply involved in every design, every photo shoot, and every word of copy. But most people who have my degree of years under their belt would not want to do that. They want to kind of phone it in.
Yeah, there's too many low-level jobs that people are too good for. That we gotta be like really adaptable and like check the ego at the door. Like, any job is a job that needs to get done.
Right. Oh yeah. We all do everything. I mean, we do these pop-ups. You would laugh. We take photos because we're like, when we're really successful, we're going to laugh at this. You guys are so much further along. I'm curious what you think. But like, we've done these pop-ups at sort of relevant events. We do really well because we don't have stores yet, and we literally like hand carry thousands of dollars. I don't know if that's am I going to get in trouble? Like, in suitcases, we're like, how many bags can we check? Can we check 10 bags for free? And we just laugh because we're like sweating, carrying this product through the airport. I mean, can you imagine a C-suite executive anywhere doing that? But that's what we all do, what it takes. But I'm having a blast. So. Yeah,
I've been there. I've done the dirt. Like, I've carried the heaviest stuff, the dirtiest things, and then to the most glamorous places.
Yeah.
Sure.
I think it's the best. I think that I tell people, even though that we're, whatever, year 14 or 15 here, it's I wake up every day like my ass is on fire, and
that's awesome.
Like, every day is the first day, and I think that's really important. But the startup phase is like the most fun.
How long would you classify the startup phase as being? How many years?
I mean, if you look at tuition payments, which I call it, I try to avoid the word mistakes, but I would say tuition payments for me, I'm still making a lot of them, too many of them. Of course, I tried to build two brands at the same time, and I just fired myself as the CEO of the other brand, nutritional brand.
Nice.
It's 3 times bigger than my apparel and footwear company. So,
interesting.
So I have a lot of executives from these big brands that came in, and I've heard I'm too much of a cowboy, and you can't do things like that, and and there's a lot of truth in that, and the processes and systems and operating rhythm and cadence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need to have some systems.
You have to.
I know.
But, not when systems break your culture,
I agree. It's hard to find the balance. I mean, finding that balance is going to be key.
It's really.
I want years. Give me the years.
Years. I think for me, in 2015, I remortgaged my house because I almost lost it all. And I
You're
think
not making me feel better.
once I
You're
went
not.
once I went all in on it, something changed in me. I started just
Mm,
banging my head against the wall, and I started using jujitsu on my business. But
mm.
then I partnered with a guy.
Okay, you
Who
got to
had,
say more about that, brother. What do you mean?
uh,
Use jujitsu on my business?
I
yeah,
I got it, but say
yeah,
yeah.
timing, leverage, balance, like angles. When do you tap out? When do you apply pressure? And I'm working on my first book, Jen, so I may have to get some advice. But yeah, I think I ended up partnering with a guy who had a big following, and there was a huge risk because we basically we traded companies. I gave him half my company and vice versa, and we went all in together. And at that moment where there was a force multiplier, things really
Mm,
started to open up for us, and we
mm.
started to compound our growth year over year. So
Interesting.
um, it was good, but I still feel like, I mean, you've got what Levi's does $4 or $5 billion a year. You've got like these brands doing massive, massive revenue. For me to get a company on 100% U.S. supply chain to like
Yeah.
500 million is quite a feat,
Oh yeah.
especially if the zippers and rivets and thread and
Oh yeah.
fiber is all from U.S.
All
soil.
U.S.
That's a
Yeah.
huge, huge feat. So
Agreed.
I would say we're still a startup, but we've got the executives and all the business units and all that stuff. I just don't think you can ever lose that mindset. Another one of my business partners, he actually built Under Armour, so he was the co-founder of Under
Yeah.
Armour. He said, Pete, until you hit like 250 of revenue, you don't create enough cash to really scale the business. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, we've scaled both my brands quite well and done it the way we wanted to. I really think it's resourcefulness that trumps all of it. I think
Mhm.
Yeah.
scrappy entrepreneurial mindset, get up and rip faces off every day. That resourcefulness really is the defining quality I actually look for in others, players that I bring onto the team. So
Well, I think you can
Amen.
also have a ton of impact. I mean, Michelle talked about her. So I'll let you, but you talked about the aesthetic then being adopted by other much bigger brands. I mean, I think we're having a huge impact already. I would argue that Nike's Super Bowl ad, which I thought was terrible, was a direct response to us calling them out repeatedly for the last 10 months.
mm,
Um, so I think we're having a huge impact. I guess what like we fight for revenue every single day, right? I have no baseline revenue. Everything is new every single day. So,
well, the
uh,
baseline changes too, right? It's like as you scale the business, you need a new baseline. What's my
yeah,
ROAS? What am I spending here? How do I get my? I mean, it's the same conversation you've had at Levi's about cogs and pennies and dimes and nickels. Like it's still the same
right.
thing, but
Yeah, it's still the same. But I mean, I think we're having a huge impact on the cultural conversation on this issue. And I think
yeah,
the other brands, they're pretending not to notice us because, as you guys both know, they're not going to pretend they notice you. That would be beneath them to pretend they notice a brand that's so small, like the size of yours, let alone the size of mine, which is 11 months old. But they notice. And I know they notice because I always noticed at
sure.
Levi's, when a brand was having impact. But you couldn't pretend to notice that. I think from a revenue perspective, I mean, I was at Levi's when we acquired Beyond Yoga, which I actually think they have really beautiful product. I
Mhm.
wore that product almost exclusively until now. I wear my own, obviously, but I think they've had impact on the product and the aesthetics in the business. And that's I won't say what their revenue is, but it's less than what you just articulated, Um,
Yeah,
anyway,
they have a great they have a great cause behind their brand. Like
yeah,
that's very authentic to the founder.
yeah, I
And
think
that's
so.
like if you're talking truth, like
Yeah.
one of the founders, like she grew up like caring about body
Shape,
types.
body
Yeah.
image, yeah,
And like
in Hollywood,
and it came
yeah,
from her mom. So it's that's where the truth always goes back to a personal experience or a family member. And I
yeah.
think mine kind of goes back to my mom because my mom was someone that was very much in resistance to aging. She tried
Oh,
so
interesting.
hard, and she passed away when she was 70. So it almost felt like we could never imagine her aging, because she also had like no gray hair, she had a perfect bob, and she was very much into always appearing sophisticated and proper to the public, and always trying to make us that way. So this is sort of where the cause often comes full circle. And I'm really trying to make that shift in the company, because we have our customers older, a lot of the partners we have and influencers we work with are over 40. But then we need to make that shift everywhere, so that everything that you see from us is like very, very focused on this.
I love that.
We should all do a collab with my nutritional company, because we have a big following and a big market share direct to consumer. And I think both of your brands would fit really well with it. It'd be good.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
I'll make sure I connect everybody together with an email. Jen, I actually don't have any of your contact info. I get in touch with you through your husband. So
through Daniel. Okay.
And also through Sarah as well. Yeah. So I'll connect you guys together. This is great. I
have another question. Sorry, I'm the one asking so many questions.
Go for it.
Pete, do you know, I assume you know the brand American Giant.
Oh, yeah. Byron.
And Bayard. You know Bayard. I know Bayard. They're based in San Francisco, and I think I met him right about when he was launching. I was just curious if you know. I think they're about the same age as you. Like, I think it was around 2010, 2011.
We've been texting back and forth to connect and see if there's any synergies on manufacturing and whatnot. So,
because they did the same. I mean, they built their factory in North Carolina, I think, and they produce everything in the U.S. He's a good guy.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Jen, you know what your next book's going to be called? Founders are braver than CEOs.
They are. I will say there is a maturity that some CEOs in established companies have. Like founders, when they fail, I do think, if they come out of the gate gangbusters, oftentimes we see this all the time. They're not equipped to manage a company that's established. They can do the cowboy thing that, Pete talked about. They can bust down doors but sometimes it is a different skill set to manage something that's large and established and has some process that doesn't handicap you, but enough that you're not like breaking laws and, screwing stuff up. So it's a different skill. I don't want to be critical of all CEOs, but
I'll be the first to admit. I mean, I literally fired myself January 1st.
Yeah.
I hired a CEO for my nutritional company, and and
you're like, I cannot.
He was an executive at Gap or Old Navy or whatever, and then ran La Colombe, the coffee brand, before they sold in December of 23. And he's running my nutritional brand, and he runs circles around me when it comes to how he's applying pressure and driving behavior within the organization, a behavior that I tried to drive for a long time, but
he's effective.
He's effective because we ask the same questions. He asks them differently. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. I agree with you. It is a skill set, but
I mean, what's necessary at any given point in time changes, and sometimes we as leaders and founders can adapt to that, and sometimes not so much. I'm hoping I can.
Jen, how would you apply pressure and change behavior? Because you obviously made it to the top, and you know how to navigate the executive landscape. Yeah, and you're also very bold, so you're not going to be someone that flies under the radar.
No, I never did. I mean, my politics were very. I lived in San Francisco. I lived in the Bay Area since 1988, moved to San Francisco in 92. My politics were very much aligned. I would have called myself left of center. And so, I was sort of bolder about that even then, because it was before, every brand was hardcore woke or progressive. And, I had certain beliefs that I think fit well with the company and even led to some extent. But whereas, where I found my clash, obviously in corporate America, was saying something that was not perceived as left-leaning when that took over corporate, when woke capitalism kind of turned things to shit, in my opinion, in about 2015. I always believed in, this sounds so corny, so pardon me, but like leading in like really, really being transparent and direct. Like if I want to see a change in behavior, I'm going to tell you. And I had to learn how to do that because I also like to be nice. But you just learn. If you have one bad apple on the team, it has like a triple whammy effect, because it's not just that they're not doing their work. They're pissing everybody else off, who then is spending their time talking about that person rather than doing their work. And you're spending more time coaching the bad employee than the really high potential one. So it's like this triple whammy. So you're just being really direct about performance, and what the expectations are, not accepting excuses. What can you do differently to affect a different outcome? I don't want to hear about your neighbor that's not doing it right. And leading by example. Like even when I was at Levi's as the CMO or as the head of e-com, or then as the brand president, there was no work I wasn't willing to do myself. In fact, I had to learn to offload more of it because, I had such broad responsibilities, but just leading by example. And then what I expect is agility, which you talked about, even for a established company employee, to be able to kind of do lots of different things, and cultural acuity. There's like this thing that you can't teach someone, and it's not necessary for all brands. You probably don't need it if you work on Swiffer at Procter and Gamble, but if you work on apparel, which is highly image driven, for Swiffer is features and benefits. You don't really need to have that, like what's going to set the cultural conversation on fire. But for me at Levi's, one of the things I kind of brought to the table was this idea that we had to put ourselves at the center of culture. Now for Levi's, that meant music and creators and, original voices. And we'd lost that. We'd become, conformists, but when Levi's has been its best, it's at the center of every cultural conversation, at Woodstock and on the top of the Berlin Wall, and we'd lost that. And so I worked really hard to bring it back, and I needed people that knew how to do that with me. But then you also need, I'll say this, I was pretty good at building a team. Like you also need someone who is not good at that, but is, data driven. And you can't expect all the people to do all the things, but you have to create the conditions where they can work together, and you have to create, extract what is necessary from all of them, and really be this like conductor orchestrating a team, which is really hard. My team was 1,000 people.
That's a lot of people.
I didn't have to coach every one of them, but
still, that's a lot of people.
I set very clear expectations, clear goals, and set a high bar for getting there for leaders, and was very direct in my communication and modeled the behavior. It's not complicated, but it's not easy either. It's not easy to do either.
I love that you said conductor, because I literally use the same metaphor. It's like my job is as a conductor, and if there's no tension on the strings, the music doesn't play. And so I have to apply the tension across the business units and get the creatives talking with the data folks. But the fact of the matter is you're applying tension from two ends. That's the magic, and you can't have slack strings. And like the getting the team where you have your BI team, talking with your e-com team and your finance team and your marketing team, and of course, manufacturing in America, your ops, and get them all singing the same tune is like, that is the magic. And
well, I think the other thing that I tried to do is keep it really simple. It's complicated. When I was younger in my career, there's a lot of people in a large corporate environment that are very invested in making things seem more complicated than they are, because that's how they keep their job. They're like, this is really hard. No one else can do it.
Get them out of your business. Get them out of your business.
But when you're younger, you don't realize. And I would come in, I'd be like, oh gosh, maybe I don't understand. Like, it seems so clear to me that 100%. This isn't complicated. And then finally, when I probably hit around 40, Michelle, to your point,
exactly.
I was like, wait a minute, I'm right. The simple solution is the best solution. Get the heck out of here. And the fact is, you can't steer a huge ship of, thousands and thousands of employees, because I had 1,000 employees, but really what I did as the brand president affected the ones that weren't even in my organization. So if you can't tell a simple tale, and create a simple goal to strive for and break it down into bite-sized pieces that they can get after, then you will fail if you make it overly complicated. So I realized at about 40 that telling a simple story that was motivating, that was my strength, not just externally to the consumer, but internally to the employees. And anyone who was telling me to make it more complicated was going to need to go.
Yeah.
To your point. But that's hard. Not everyone, I realize, can do that. And I was told all the time, oh, you can't do that. We don't do it that way. And I'd be like, why? Why can't I? I can do that. I mean, by employees, by peers, by senior, you can't do it that way. Well, I think I can. And so I always had this like willingness to kind of do it my own way, which is unusual. But it would work out for me. So that was fine. I just crossed the Rubicon in 2020. So that's fine.
So Jen, this seems to be something that's happened not just in your case, but in the case of people like Elon Musk, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, and a whole host of other people that 10 years ago, all of these guys and gals would have been considered left of center. Yet today, it doesn't seem to be so much about left or right. It's more about common sense and insane. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on where you stand in the political spectrum these days, because I don't think your views have changed all that much, have they?
I would argue that they haven't. It's that meme that I think Colin Wright made that Elon shared however many years ago. That's like, here I was in the center. I mean, I was probably far left of center. And then the left just ran, and you're like, what the heck happened? Now I'm like considered far right because the left went so nuts. But I had been a Democrat my whole life because I believe in free speech. And you can laugh, but the Democrats were the party. The left were the champions of free speech. The ACLU, they defended Nazis' right to march in Skokie famously. I was anti-war, protect the little guy and the vulnerable. Those to me were classical liberal values that the Democrats don't believe in anymore. And, for me with COVID, it was just so alarming and so authoritarian. The idea that the government could tell me I could not leave my home. I couldn't have people in my home. I couldn't worship, which I don't really do, but whatever, it's important to a lot of people. I couldn't send my children to public school, but people could send their kids to private school. Like, it felt so antithetical to me and such a violation of the left's own stated values that I could no longer be part of it. I'm probably closest to libertarian at this point. I'm not a registered Republican, but I did vote. I did vote for Trump. That was the first Republican I ever voted for in my life.
Wow. If they've lost you and they've lost Joe Rogan, it's going to be a long time before they can come back from anything.
Yeah, a lot of us are independents because I think, at least for myself, I won't speak for Rogan, who I don't know. And, we don't want to be really affiliated with any party that dictates what we think at this point. Like, I don't want to be a Republican either. Right now, I'm more closely aligned to what but there's aspects of the right that I'm still very much not in favor of. So I'm not all good with them either, to be super clear. So I'll just stay independent and make my own decisions about what I care about and what I want to vote for, because I don't want to be dictated to by any party. I mean, I'm still pro-choice. I would call myself a feminist. I think the left's gone insane with, their position on choice, and I don't agree with that anymore. But anyway, I don't really want an affiliation with either party. I find them both to be, I can't line up. Yeah, everyone, you here, if for the Americans, you used to be able to be in a party and not share all the views of that party. There was such a thing as a pro-choice Republican. There was a pro-life Democrat. Like, you could do that. You can't do that anymore. Although I do think the Republican Party at this point is the bigger tent, and I think the Republican convention was evidence of that. The Democrat Party is a very tiny tent, and it's getting smaller every day, and they just yell at you all day long that you're a racist, and people are tired of it.
Yeah, I think it's more of getting back to like the core, America's core values. We were talking brand, and America is the strongest brand of all time.
For sure.
Like, what are some of our core
100%.
values? And I think people are just like, we're off the brand book right now. We're
Yeah.
way off the brand book. Like, I even remember in school learning about this. And yeah, I mean, boys shouldn't play girl sports. Like, I think a
Right.
core value
It's a
is,
no-brainer.
you know what I mean?
Fairness.
It's like so stupid, simple. I think a core value of America is manufacturing, you know?
Yeah.
And when I look at the, you know, politically, both parties contributed. Like Ross Perot standing there saying, you're going to hear a giant sucking sound of our jobs going south.
Yeah.
And you've got Bush and Clinton looking at him and smirking to one another. Like, come on now. Like, everybody contributed to the hollowing out of our communities and our factories. You know, it was greed. Greed plays in all circles. It is bipartisan. It does not.
Oh, for sure.
It does not
Yeah.
care. So you got to have strong voices like these women on this phone call to help course correct this thing, because that's really what we're doing.
Wouldn't you argue that, you know, freedom clearly an American value, which has been curtailed mostly by the left, I would argue, in the last 5 years. But merit is also an American value. Work hard, get ahead, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Yes.
And the whole movement or the project of the last 10 years, which exploded in 2020, is anti-merit.
Yes.
And so I think people are feeling it and seeing it, and all the people you named who have left the Democratic Party, but really the Democratic Party left them. And, you know, some of them I would consider friends. It's the same. Like, none of them would say my values changed. They would all say my values are the same, and the left went insane.
Yeah. I remember, and I know we're both good friends with Tulsi, Jen, but like when Tulsi came up to Maine for the first time and I walked her through the factory, she had like a visceral response. She's like, oh shit, like America's missing this, like people with purpose, making things, walking away at the end of the day, looking back and saying like, feeling fulfilled, you know, like that, that's important. So yeah, no, I think we're getting back to the book, back to the brand book of America and what it was founded on.
I like that. That's a good way to say it. The Canadians are losing it too, you two. Just
Tell me about it, girl.
The Canadians might be more hopeless than the Americans.
I don't know about hopeless. I think we're on our way to kicking the bad guys out of power. But Michelle, I was going to ask you, you know, what do you think is the core value of Canada right now that you and your company really represent and stand up for?
I think it's unity. I think it's Canada is definitely known for diversity. And really, when we build companies, we want diversity. When we build really anything, I think we just want to think of it as how can we be as united as possible, like elevating everybody around you. It's almost like the Jamaican core value, out of many, one people. Also, my mom was from Jamaica, so I'll always have that core value at heart. And and really, I think that's what Canada is. It's a melting pot, and I think that's what I think there could be some more ambition. And I like the core value of merit. I would love to infuse a lot more merit and a lot of self-reliance and pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps and a focus on business and creativity, supporting the arts. I've always wished that Canada would support the arts more. The way that if you go to Berlin, you see artists from a lot of Canadian artists because they've gone there because they're getting supported by Germany. Yeah. So I just think that supporting things to make your country better, and like finding a way that we can support each other despite differences. That there's differences, but honoring differences, but also standing in your own conviction, which respecting someone else's opinion, which no one respects a differing opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would have said a core value for America was this idea that we're sort of united in how different we all are. You know, it is a nation of immigrants. We all have different views, but we can come together and be united in that difference. And in fact, the most successful ad I ever made for Levi's was an ad called Circles, and that that was the brief. And it was just like fire for us. I mean, it was insane how well it did. And I think about it now, we made it in 2017 and we couldn't, if I was still there, I don't think I could make that ad now. Like just the premise that we should be united in our difference. We should come together over the fact that you're different, I'm different, but we have a lot in common in having difference and feeling different all the time. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't think you could make that in an established company right now. Maybe you could. And that was such a metaphor for Levi's, because Levi's is worn by everyone, right? The minivan mom, the hip-hop kid, the cowboy, the laborer, like the immigrant, like everybody wears 501. So it was just this cool metaphor for the brand. And I think it is really what America is about. And we've lost that because now we're all in opposition to each other.
Yeah, because we don't know the other person's story. Like we don't know their entire story. So just giving, like, assume positive intent, like we need to be as business owners, and just say, well, this is my perspective. I stand in this, and that's yours, and that's what it is.
I can still know that you're a good person, even if we disagree. But as we all know, that is not how it's been for the last 10 years, 5 years.
No. Michelle, I really like what you said, out of many one, e pluribus unum. You know, that is something that's on American currency, right? E pluribus unum, out of many one. It's a beautiful, beautiful sentiment. I think some other core Canadian values is we here in Canada believe in fair play. We believe in giving people, everybody, the same opportunities. We don't believe in favoritism. We love hockey. It was. I got to say, I was embarrassed that some of my fellow Canadians were booing the national anthem. I did not like that. It really pissed me off. But you know, I love President Trump. He's one of my heroes. But you know, as a Canadian, some of the trolling he's doing of Trudeau has been a little much. I'm like, okay, Mr. President, start cooling off, man. Enough of this 51st state BS. Okay. So, and secondly, you know, we lost that first game, and I got to tell you, every Canadian in the country was so pissed off because we expect to win every hockey game. We never expect to lose in hockey. So it was a hell of a thing. It was a hell of a thing. But it was great that we won the last game. Love Connor McDavid. He scored a beautiful goal, and God bless him for doing that. The other thing that
rub it in.
Yes, well, there you go. If you call this rubbing it in, brother, come on. So the other thing that we in Canada really see as a core value is standing up for freedom. You know, in World War II, the Germans wanted to, near the end, they wanted to surrender to American soldiers. They wanted to surrender to English soldiers, British soldiers. They didn't really want to surrender to the Soviets because, you know, they thought the Soviets were going to basically abuse them and send them to prison camps, but they never wanted to surrender to Canadians because the order from on high had come, give no quarter. They try to surrender and mow them down, which was against, you know, the Geneva Convention and all of that. But when Canada sent a bunch of our soldiers to do a raid in Dieppe in France in 1943, 13,000 Canadians were basically mowed down by the Germans then. We were ticked off. So, you know, don't piss us off. When it's when you piss off a Canadian to a certain point, they stop being nice. They stop saying sorry. They stop being impolite. And that's one of the things that, as a Canadian, I'm proud of. We stand up for what's right. We stand up for each other, and we stand up for making the values that Canada, America share in common great. You know, freedom, fair play, merit, ambition, the opportunity for good people to pursue their dreams, to pursue happiness. I think Thomas Jefferson said it really beautifully, you know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And the pursuit of happiness is what the three of you are doing. You're doing something that gives you a lot of joy. The sense I get from all of you is that this doesn't seem like work to you. You know, a lot of people who work as hard as you do wouldn't want to do it because it wears them out. But you seem like you're loving it. It doesn't seem like work to you. And I'm just wondering if you could all comment on that. Michelle, why don't you start?
I think it's really when you're in alignment with what you're best at and what you're passionate about. And then the greatest part is when you really can serve the world in a big way. Like that will be like the greatest satisfaction, or where you'll feel like you're truly in perfect alignment. It's hard work, so it's grueling. But the amazing thing is that you grow so much as a person that sure, if your business grows, that's wonderful. But when you look back, you've grown so much as a human being every single time you look back. And I think that those major shifts, especially when you go through hard times, I think that's when we're growing the most, and that's so fulfilling. And if we can just keep finding ways to keep our business as much in alignment with what we're here to do, I think we can't go wrong.
Amen. Amen. Pete, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was having an ADHD moment. That's a superpower. Used to be my kryptonite, before I turned 40 and I figured out that I had a brain. And so you're going to have to ask me the question again. But my ADHD moment was actually, you guys have a thing in Canada. You were talking about World War II. You have a song, right, about like some fields, is that like some type of
Flanders
Fields?
Flanders Field. Flanders
Yeah.
Field.
Yeah.
And so I believe the gentleman who wrote that was the heir to the Eileen Donnan Castle up in Scotland, right, where the last stronghold of the Jacobite Revolution. I'm pretty sure there's a guy that wrote in Flanders Field, like was of the descendants, like the last descendant of that stronghold. And I was just thinking about how united everybody truly is through DNA. You know what I mean? Like to Jen's earlier point, like that's part of a core value is being an individuality. That's why I love Jen and Blue Jeans so much. It's,
Right.
you can be free-minded regardless of where you are in the world or at what time. You never can lock away the mind. So anyways,
No.
ADHD moment, but your question was what?
Yeah. So what I was saying is, because you are so into what you're doing and this cause is so near and dear to your heart, it doesn't seem like work to you. It seems like you're doing something that you love all day long. And I'm just wondering what your comments are on that. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, last year was my hardest year at, my 45th year of existence, trying to run and scale two companies and lots of chiefs and not enough Indians, and everybody has an opinion because they worked at big Fortune 500 companies. And it was the first year I ever worked in my life. Last year was, and I found that that I was spending my time capacity and capital in some instances in the wrong places, and that's why I actually changed. That's why I fired myself from one of the companies, and so up until that point, I hadn't worked a day in my life. And at the start of this year, again, it's just. It is part of my DNA. It's like I work out, I train, I try to eat healthy, although I am a Greek kid who can eat everything. I try to eat healthy, and I work, and I think that's important. I will tell you though, my wife and I like to travel, and we like to see the old world, and we're really inspired by walking the streets of Genoa or Lisbon, or we would love to travel. We'd love to see the old world. And we were in France last year, and we're at this little Italian restaurant with a woman there, and I asked her, so what do you do? And she's like, oh, I love art. And I was like, oh, and
Cool.
she's like, I love art. I actually have a book with my art. I got a divorce from my husband after 30 something years of marriage, and I just found this real passion for art. And she just wanted to talk about her passions, and in America we just want to talk about our work. And I've found now, as I've hit the midpoint in life, like for me, my work has been my passion. and it's really important. But at the same time, it can't be the only thing that makes up my life. Like
Right.
I don't want my legacy or my kids just to think that work is
You just
what makes a true and pure life. It is a piece of the pie, just like finance is a piece of the pie in business or supply
yeah.
chain. Like it's a piece of the pie. So I've never worked a day in my life, but I do enjoy all there is to offer outside of work.
So, Pete, what's one thing outside of work that you're super passionate about that I wouldn't know about? Because I know you love jujitsu, so don't give me jujitsu. Give me something
Yeah.
else.
One thing I'm super passionate about outside of work. Gosh, let me expose myself here. Uh, I will tell you on Instagram, I follow artists.
Yeah?
Yeah. So I was an art major in college. I dropped out. Um, but I love art. My wife and I like to collect art.
No way.
Yeah, yeah. So everywhere we go, we try to, we go to, and find artists, off the beaten path and whatnot. And the other thing is I'm a foodie. Nick, I make pasta. I took a pasta cooking class in
Nice.
Bologna, and I love food. I mean, look at me. I'm a fat kid. I love food. What can I say?
You're hardly fat, buddy. So, Pete, I'm going to introduce you to a guy who's in my men's group. And I'm going to show this to you ladies as well. But so I don't know if you can see this.
I can't.
This is a photo so I'll send this to you guys by email or text. But this guy is a guy in my men's group. He's from Oklahoma. He's soft spoken. You would not think this guy is anybody with anything super special. He's a really good man. But then he goes, I'm into taking photos, and he's like Jenny's around you and I's age, maybe even a couple years older. And he says, I want to start doing photography, at this stage in my life. I want to have a little photo business. So there's about 13, 14 men in the group. So we told him, listen, start posting a photo a day in the group. And we just say, hey, let's just to, get the ball rolling. Show us your stuff. The guy sends us a photo, his very first photo. Buddy, it looks like a Peter Lick or an Ansel Adams. You guys know who those guys are in the world of photography?
Yes.
Peter Lick is one of the greatest living photographers, and Ansel Adams is maybe the greatest photographer of all time. And I'm going, you took this? Richard, you took this? He goes, yeah, I took this. Then he starts posting other ones. They are unreal. So I told him, look, I'm going to coach you because you don't know anything about business, and you're going to have a little photography business in your old age to keep you going. And I'm going to find people who like art photography, and I'm going to buy a couple of your photos myself and send them out to friends and keep a couple. But you guys got to see this guy's stuff. I'll send you his website.
Yeah, send please.
His website sucks, but the photos are unreal. Unreal. And his brother is a curator of a major art museum in LA. So go figure. He's going to get his brother to try and, get a little exhibition of his stuff going. But
Cool.
That's super, super cool. And one of my business buddies, who's a CEO, founder like you, Pete, he's your age, maybe. I think he's maybe a year or two older than you. He paints, and he's pretty good. I'm not saying you'd want to spend money to buy his stuff, but for a CEO, he paints to relax, and it seems to be working for him. So that's pretty cool.
Send me his Instagram. I'll check it out.
I will. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. Okay, so Jen, what about you? Is this work for you, or is it not work because you're loving it so much? And what's one thing out of business that you love? Just like Pete, I want all you guys to answer that.
I have worked hard my whole life. I love to work. I mean, if you think training to be an elite gymnast isn't hard work, and I always tell people there's nothing that will ever be as hard as that. I get to eat. No one's grabbing food. No one's weighing me in and announcing it to all the employees and screaming at me that I'm fat. And I don't have to drag around a broken ankle and work out anyway. So nothing will ever be as hard as training in gymnastics. But, and clearly I was doing that and not getting paid because I love the sport until I didn't, because it went crazy. So I have, my whole life I have put work. I love work. And I agree with Pete. You don't want your children to believe. And some people, that's not. My husband does not like work. He does not like work. He, he's the stay-at-home dad. He loves taking care of our children and taking care of our family, and that's what he loves, and that's what gives him meaning. And he loves to read. And argue about politics, and that's what he loves. That's that, and acquire knowledge. He doesn't feel the need to put that knowledge to apply it, just to collect knowledge for the sake of it, which I think is really interesting. So we're a good kind of complement, because I love to work, and this doesn't feel like work, but I don't know. I've never done anything that did. I mean, I loved my time at Levi's. I loved it. I love that brand. I've worn it since I was 6 years old. I think it's a beautiful brand that makes beautiful product. And, when they're on and, doing what is right and true to that brand, I think nothing beats it, although I'll go check out Origin. But I still have hundreds of pairs of Levi's. So, it'll be hard to get me out of 501s probably. I mean, if you started working there in 99 and you bought all the new styles all the time, you can imagine how many pairs of Levi's I have. So I love work. It doesn't feel like work, but I've never chosen to do anything that felt like work. So this isn't particularly different for me. But I will tell you, before we launched, a friend of mine who did his own startup, very successful, and sold it, not in our space, in the media space. He told me, your worst day is going to be worse than any day you ever had at Levi's, and the best is going to be so much better. And, in 11 months, you guys are all nodding. I mean, that's so true. Like, the worst days, I'm just like, why? Yeah. No one's coming to our website. Yeah. And the best days are, like, insane. So that's fun to me. I like that. I'm having a great time, and I'm not going to accept failure, because I never accept failure. So,
Jen, I will tell you, Jen, I remember we would go days without an order, like days. And there were so many weeks where I would meet my business partner, Dedeco, in Portland, Maine at Becky's Diner, and we'd have an omelet, and he'd give me cash, and I'd go back and I'd deposit and make payroll. Wow. And that's like what makes.
You're making me feel better.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, it's par for the course to get that momentum. Really is a sheer force of will. And like, I'm seeing you guys everywhere. I pay attention.
Oh, and you make me feel better, because I haven't had a day with no orders.
Yeah, well, that's good. Days where you're that's like, real
where
good.
Are the?
That's
amazing.
You're 11 months in. I mean, that's real good.
Had one. Yeah. But there's been days where it's really slow, and there have been days because, of course, it's on my phone. I can see everything. It's just like ding, 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 and you're like, what?
Yeah.
But yeah, you're making me feel better. It's hard to find people that will actually share what it was like, because the people who are further along. I don't know. They want to kind of act like they were always on this road to, they don't really want to tell you what was super hard about it and what those tough days were like. So thank you. I really appreciate it, because you're both providing encouragement. I have to run and get my daughter in a second. So if the things I like and care about and do outside of work, it's my family, that's it. My relationship, you have to work at those. My children, I have 4 kids.
Awesome.
Pete, I'm going to send you, I have 2 grown children, both artists. One just finished his MFA at NYU. The other's at Cooper Union right now. And they're amazing. One's a painter.
Oh, wow.
One's more of an illustrator. So I'm going to send you theirs, because you're going to think they're.
I want to see them too. I want to see them too. I like supporting. I like supporting artists, especially from people that I know. I think that's fantastic. So, Jen, I know you got to go, but Michelle, real quick, what's one thing you're passionate about outside of work?
Well, definitely my kids, but in terms of, I love so many sports, but right now, like, I love skiing still, surfing whenever possible. But I'd say the one thing that I really took up again this summer was flamenco dance, which a lot of people might not even know what that is. I did it in my throughout my 20s, and I thought, I'm gonna do this again for the pure joy of it. I did it only for joy, and so cool. I'm so glad I reignited that. So lots of forms of dance I love, and just doing it to do it. There's nothing more than that.
It's cool.
And I'll tell you mine real quick. I got a lot of things too, but right now I'm going for my IFBB Pro Bodybuilding card. I'm 57, so at the age of 60, I can go for that. So, Jen, I am weighing everything I eat. There's things I can't eat. I train every day. I got to make sure I sleep at least 9 hours a day, which isn't always possible. And I got a hard-ass coach who's on my case. So I feel you, girl. I feel you from back in the day. Guys, it was an honor to have the three of you on the show. I hope you had as much fun as I did. This was not work for me. This was fun. I want to make sure I connect everybody with one another. I'd really love to find ways to continue to have you guys be in touch and support. I've got some ideas about seeing if I can find a couple of other apparel folks, maybe do a day or an event somewhere. Maybe we come to Pete's factory, all of us, hang out there. Maybe we go to Jen's, maybe we go to Michelle's, and I'll get a few other people going. I think that could be a lot of fun. Pete, I'm going to come to Maine this summer. Teresa was all gung-ho to do the jiu-jitsu, and then all of a sudden she said, I got to share a room with other people, and she says, no, I don't want to do it. So I'm trying to either figure out if I can persuade her to change her mind, or I got to come by myself, but I'm going to come to Maine and we'll figure some stuff out. Love all you guys. God bless you. Thanks for being on the show.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet everyone. Thank you guys so much.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you.
Michelle.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
This episode has been brought to you by eCircleAcademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.